All right, so get this. We're diving deep today into AI and leadership. You've probably heard the hype about AI, automating tasks. But what we're seeing now is AI like stepping right into the boardroom, shaping strategies, and even, influencing how leaders make decisions.
Yeah, it's a huge shift. We're going from AI as just a tool to like make things more efficient to AI being a strategic partner.
Exactly. To like really get where this is all going. We're doing a deep dive on this 2025 report. It's called AI Opportunities in Strategy and Leadership. Think of it like a glimpse into the future, how the best companies will be using AI.
And the report makes it clear that the business world is getting more complex, right? There's so much more data to look at, and everyone, stakeholders, I mean, they're demanding ethical and sustainable practices. So AI is becoming a key tool for leaders to handle all of this.
It's not even just keeping up. It's about doing well in a world that's constantly changing. I mean, think about it. The report says that Fortune 500 companies are tracking 3 times more data points than like just 10 years ago. Could you imagine trying to figure all that out without some serious help from AI?
It would be impossible for any human team. And think back to the pandemic, those disruptions in 2020, the report found that companies that had already integrated AI into their leadership were able to bounce back almost 40% faster. So it's not just about efficiency, it's about resilience and adaptability.
Yeah, and the report talks about these 4 levels of AI maturity and leadership from, basic analysis to actually adapting strategies on the fly.
Sure.
Like imagine a system that is constantly learning and adjusting based on what's happening. That's a huge strategic advantage.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand those 4 levels.
Right.
They basically describe a journey. You start with what they call diagnostic, where AI is mostly used to analyze data and find trends. Then you have predictive, where AI helps predict, potential problems and opportunities.
Go like a crystal ball, but with data.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have prescriptive, where AI actually starts recommending things to do based on the data. But the real game changer is that 4th level. They call it adaptive AI.
Yeah, that's the one that really stood out to me. Adaptive AI is almost like having a super intelligent co-pilot right there in the boardroom.
That's a great way to put it. Adaptive AI is learning all the time. It's watching the business environment and it's adjusting strategies as it goes. The report found that companies that are at this level, they're outperforming the others by a crazy 32% in things like profit and market share. That's huge.
And it's really interesting. You might think this is all just for big tech companies, but the report says that AI is becoming more accessible to companies of all sizes and across industries.
Absolutely. One of the big takeaways is the democratization of AI cloud platforms and easier to use tools are making sophisticated AI capabilities available to businesses that wouldn't have even thought about it a few years ago.
So we're talking healthcare, manufacturing, even the government. AI is changing leadership everywhere. But I think this is a question a lot of people have. How do you even measure the return on investment for something like strategic AI? It's not as easy as calculating, cost savings, right?
You got it. It's about the long-term gains, making smarter decisions, and getting your company ready to succeed in a world that's becoming, so complex and unpredictable. The report actually digs into this and shows how using AI has led to things like better forecasts, faster planning, and a big increase in successful innovation.
So it's not just keeping up. It's about getting a competitive edge by making smarter, more data-driven decisions. But who are the players driving all of this? Where are these AI tools coming from?
Well, there's a pretty diverse landscape. You have the big software companies that you might expect, but there are also these consulting firms that are specializing in AI, and then a whole bunch of AI startups are popping up. And some companies are even building their own solutions.
Sounds like a dynamic market. Any insights into who's leading the charge?
The report says that while those big companies still have a large market share, the AI startup scene is growing twice as fast. That tells us there's a lot of innovation and investment in this space, and we'll probably see even more specialized tools coming out soon.
Before the break, we were talking about how AI is going beyond just, crunching numbers and getting into strategic decision making. And honestly, some of these new technologies sound like something right out of science fiction.
I know, right? It's kind of mind-blowing to think about how these innovations could change how companies are led.
So let's break down some of these futuristic ideas. You mentioned something called cognitive diversity simulation earlier. What exactly is that?
Okay, so imagine you're facing a really complex strategic challenge. You've got your team together, everyone's brainstorming, but you just have this feeling that you might be missing something. That's where cognitive diversity simulation comes in.
So it's like a built-in devil's advocate kind of pushing back on assumptions and offering different perspectives.
Exactly. You're basically creating a virtual team of AI advisors, each with their own perspective background, even personality. These AI agents can challenge your assumptions, point out blind spots, and suggest solutions that your human team might not have even thought of.
It's like brainstorming on steroids, but AI is doing the hard work.
Mm.
And speaking of different perspectives, this next one is really interesting. You mentioned something called strategic language and narrative analysis. How does AI help us understand narratives?
Well, think about all the information that's out there. Company communications, industry reports, news articles, even social media. It's a flood of language, and hidden within that language are narrative stories that shape how people see things and influence decisions.
So it's not just what people are saying, but how they're saying it. I'm starting to see where AI could be useful here.
Yeah, strategic language and narrative analysis uses AI to analyze all that language data, find emerging trends, and even understand the sentiment and emotions behind it.
This could be so valuable for companies. Imagine being able to track how your brand is being perceived or how your competitors' messaging is changing.
You could even use it to shape your own communication in a way that resonates with your audience and, controls the narrative. We're moving beyond just data-driven decisions to narrative-driven decisions.
Okay, this next one is really pushing the boundaries of what I thought was possible. Let's talk about collaborative intelligence networks. Is this really about companies sharing their AI, not just their data?
It is. What if companies could connect their AI systems securely and work together to solve big problems? Not just sharing data, but actually combining their AI power.
I'm trying to picture this. What would that look like in real life?
Imagine a group of companies in the same industry, maybe even competitors, pooling their AI resources to tackle a problem they all face. It could be anything from optimizing a supply chain to developing a new technology.
So it's like going from competing to collaborating with AI as the bridge. I can see the potential. But what about data security? If companies are sharing their AI, how do you keep information safe?
That's a great question, and the report talks about some possible solutions. Things like secure multi-party computation and federated learning are being developed, so AI systems can work together without actually sharing the raw data.
So to put it simply, it's like finding a way for those AI systems to share secrets without anyone else listening. Pretty clever. All of this sounds incredibly futuristic, but are we seeing any of these technologies being used today?
It's still early days, but there are some really exciting examples. In finance, some firms are starting to use early versions of cognitive diversity simulation to test their investment strategies and find weaknesses in their thinking. And in healthcare, collaborative intelligence networks are being explored to share data for research while still protecting patient privacy. It's exciting to think about what this kind of collaboration could do.
It feels like we're going from science fiction to reality really fast. I'm curious, are there any other groundbreaking AI technologies coming up that we should know about?
There are a couple that are really mind-bending even for us. Have you heard of neuromorphic strategic simulation?
It sounds like something out of Star Trek. What does that even mean?
It's pretty wild. It's about building AI systems that are like the human brain. They try to copy its structure and how it works.
So instead of just working with numbers, these AI systems are trying to think like humans. That's fascinating, but also a little creepy.
It is. The idea is to use these brain-inspired systems to create simulations of things like financial markets or even whole economies that are more realistic and complex.
And what's the benefit of that?
It could totally change how we do strategic planning. Imagine being able to run these super detailed simulations that include things like human behavior, emotions, and even irrational decisions. It could lead to much better predictions about the future.
Okay, that one blew my mind a little, but you mentioned another one that sounds even more complex. What was it? Something with quantum?
Yes, quantum-enhanced strategic optimization. This is where things get really interesting.
I'm listening. But to be honest, I don't know much about quantum computing.
It's a pretty mind-boggling field. To put it simply, quantum computers use the principles of quantum mechanics to do calculations that are impossible for even the most powerful regular computers. It's like comparing a bike to a spaceship in terms of processing power.
So how does this connect to strategic optimization?
Well, imagine using that huge computing power to solve really complex business problems. We're talking about optimizing global supply chains, managing huge investment portfolios, even designing completely new business models. It could change everything about how we make strategic decisions.
I have to admit, I'm a little overwhelmed by all of this. It's really exciting, but also a little scary to think about what it all means.
I get it. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how businesses work and how leaders make decisions. It's important to remember that while these technologies have huge potential, they also come with challenges and risks.
Like what? What are some things we need to be careful about?
Well, data privacy and security are big concerns. As AI systems get more sophisticated and connected, we need to make sure that sensitive information is protected.
Of course. Anything else?
We also need to watch out for biases that can sneak into AI algorithms. If we're not careful, these biases can lead to unfair or discriminatory results.
So it's not just about the technology itself,
Yeah.
but how it's developed and used.
Hmm.
We need to make sure AI is used ethically and responsibly.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the human element. These AI tools are powerful, but they're not a replacement for human judgment and intuition.
So it's about finding the right balance between human and artificial intelligence. This has been an amazing look into the future of leadership. We've covered a lot, and it's clear that AI is going to play a huge role in shaping how companies are led.
It's a fascinating and rapidly changing landscape. As we wrap up part two, let's take a moment to think about what we've learned so far. We've seen how AI is moving from just doing tasks to actually improving human intelligence, helping leaders make better decisions.
And we've looked at some incredible innovations that are pushing the limits of what's possible. But as we enter this new era of AI-driven leadership, it's crucial to remember that technology is only one part of the equation.
Right. We need to approach this change responsibly, making sure that AI is used ethically and benefits everyone. When we come back for the last part of our deep dive, we'll explore these challenges more and talk about what it takes to be a good leader in a world of intelligent machines.
Welcome back to our deep dive into AI and leadership. We've covered so much, from AI's growing role in making strategic decisions to those almost unbelievable innovations that are, reshaping the future of leadership.
If you're just joining us, you might want to go back and listen to the first two parts because we've been on quite a journey.
It has been quite a journey, right? We've seen how AI is going beyond just, automating those everyday tasks to actually making human intelligence better, helping leaders to make more informed decisions, more strategic and frankly more impactful decisions.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, but let's be real, it can also be a little overwhelming. We've touched on some pretty mind-blowing ideas, and I think it's important to step back and ask, what does all of this really mean for leaders? In the real world, where do we even begin to understand this AI revolution? That's a great question. And the report that we've been looking at, AI opportunities and strategy and leadership actually gives us some really practical advice on this. It says that successful AI adoption isn't about replacing human leaders with robots. It's about helping them do their jobs better and giving them the power to make better decisions.
So it's about humans and AI working together,
Yeah.
each one using their strengths.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make that happen? Where do we start?
Well, the report highlights how important it is to take a strategic and phased approach. It's not about trying to do everything at once and implementing every single AI tool out there. It's about starting with specific things where AI can really add value and then growing from there.
So it's like finding those areas where AI can make a real difference.
Yeah.
Maybe it's analyzing market trends or, optimizing a really complex supply chain and then focusing on using solutions that meet those specific needs.
Exactly. It's about integrating AI into the decision-making processes you already have instead of, trying to start from scratch. And that brings us to another important point, building internal expertise.
Right? We can't just rely on vendors or consultants to do all the work for us.
You got it.
Right.
Companies need to invest in developing their own understanding of AI, so their teams not only know how to use these tools, but also how to interpret the results. Identify any biases and make sure the AI aligns with the company's strategy and values.
This idea of AI literacy is so interesting. I'm curious, what does that actually look like? In a company, how do you create a culture where everyone understands AI?
It has many different aspects. It involves, training and development programs to teach employees about AI concepts and how to use AI. It also means creating a culture where people are encouraged to experiment, to explore these new AI tools, and find creative ways to use them for real-world problems.
That's about giving people a space to learn, experiment, and even, fail sometime.
Exactly. It's about changing how people think and breaking down those walls that often exist between the tech teams and the business leaders.
And it's important to remember that AI isn't some magic solution. It's a powerful tool, but it has its limits. We need to be aware of those limitations, make sure the data is good, and keep humans involved in the whole process.
That's crucial. AI can be incredibly powerful, but it's not perfect. And that's why the report also stresses how important transparency, explainability, and ethical frameworks are. We can't just blindly trust these systems. We need to understand how they work, and we need to make sure they're being used responsibly and ethically.
This has been such a great discussion, and I think we've really covered a lot. We've explored how AI can transform leadership, but we've also talked about the challenges and how important it is to implement it responsibly. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question to consider. Think about your own field, your own industry. What's the most exciting way you can imagine AI being used for leadership? And what's the biggest challenge you think you'll face?
That's a fantastic question. And, don't be afraid to think big. We're really at a turning point, and the ways AI can improve leadership are only limited by our imagination. So stay curious, stay involved, and keep exploring this amazing new frontier.
I couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of leadership.